The observation deck of the Stellar Dominion was dead quiet during the night cycle. Jake Miller pushed his cleaning cart down the polished corridor, humming an old Earth song under his breath. The wheels squeaked a little as they rolled over the smooth alien metal floor. He'd been working as a janitor on this massive Valthorian flagship for 6 months now. The pay was good, the work was boring, and the aliens mostly pretended he didn't exist. That was fine by him. He cleaned, he got paid, he went home. Simple life for a simple guy. Jake stopped at a junction between corridors and pulled out his spray bottle. The walls here always got smudged with weird alien handprints. He was just about to start wiping when he heard something that didn't belong on a military warship. Crying. Soft, sniffling, heartbroken crying. The kind that kids make when they're trying really hard not to cry but can't help it anymore. He froze, listening. There it was again. Coming from a small alcove just around the corner, the kind of spot where maintenance panels and storage lockers were tucked away. Jake set down his spray bottle and walked quietly toward the sound. His work boots made soft thuds on the metal floor. When he turned the corner, he found the source. A kid. Not a human kid though. This one had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly under the dim corridor lights. The child's eyes glowed faintly, like someone had put tiny lights behind them. Tears rolled down those glowing cheeks, catching the light as they fell. The kid couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, maybe younger. It was hard to tell with alien children. The boy was wearing a robe that looked like it cost more than Jake made in a year. Dark purple fabric with silver threading that formed complex patterns. Way too fancy for a kid. Way too big too. The sleeves hung past the child's hands and the bottom dragged on the floor. The boy looked lost inside all that expensive cloth. But what really caught Jake's attention were the boots. Holy cow, those boots. They were the most complicated things Jake had ever seen. Heavy black leather, or whatever aliens used instead of leather, with metal reinforcements along the sides. And the laces. Oh man, the laces. There must have been 20 different straps and laces crisscrossing up the front of each boot, all tangled together into an impossible knot. Like someone had tried to solve a puzzle while blindfolded. The kid's small hands were pulling uselessly at the mess, fingers getting caught in the loops and tangles. Every failed attempt brought fresh tears. The boy's breathing was hitching, that horrible sound kids make when they've been crying so hard they can barely breathe right anymore. Jake felt something twist in his chest. He'd heard that sound before. His nephew Tommy used to cry just like that when he was little and something went wrong. When his toy broke or he couldn't figure out his homework. That desperate, overwhelmed crying that made you want to fix whatever was wrong right away. "Hey there, buddy," Jake said softly, keeping his voice gentle. He didn't want to scare the kid. He walked over slowly and knelt down on the cold metal floor beside the alcove. His knees cracked a little. Getting old. The child's head snapped up. Those glowing eyes went wide with shock, tears still clinging to the small face. The boy's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Like a fish gasping for air. Finally, words came out in perfect English, which surprised Jake a little. The voice was small and scared. You're not allowed to help me." Jake blinked. Not allowed to help? What kind of rule was that? He looked at the tangled mess of boot laces again, then back at the kid's tear-stained face. Screw the rules. A kid was crying, and Jake knew how to tie shoes. "Well, nobody told me that," Jake said with a gentle smile, the kind you use with scared children. "How about we just keep it between us? Our little secret. What's your name?" The boy hesitated, glowing eyes darting around like he expected guards to jump out from somewhere. Then he whispered, so quiet Jake almost didn't hear it. "Kale. Nice to meet you, Kale. I'm Jake." He reached out slowly toward the tangled boots. "Now let's see about these boots of yours. They look pretty tricky." Kale didn't pull away, which Jake took as permission. He gently took hold of the first boot and started working on the impossible tangle. His fingers moved through the mess with practiced ease. Jake had a niece back on Earth, little Amy, who was 9 years old. He'd tied thousands of shoes in his time. Kids' shoes, adult shoes, fancy dress shoes, sneakers, boots. He'd seen every kind of knot and tangle imaginable. This was just a more complicated version of the same problem. "See, the trick is you gotta find which lace goes where first," Jake explained, talking through what he was doing. "Kids learn better when you explain things. You pull this one here, that loosens this loop. Then you can slide this strap out. Like solving a puzzle, you know?" Kale watched intently, sniffling but no longer crying quite as hard. He was focused on Jake's hands now, watching how the fingers moved through the complicated lacing system. Jake kept talking, keeping his voice calm and steady. My niece Amy, she's about your age. Maybe a little older. She used to get her laces tangled all the time. I'd sit with her every morning before school, teaching her the loop method. You know what that is? You make a loop with one lace, we call it a bunny ear, then wrap the other lace around it and pull through. Creates a nice knot that doesn't come undone easy, but you can still untie it when you need to. He got the first boot completely untangled, then started lacing it properly from the bottom up. The system was weird, with the laces going through metal rings and under leather straps in a specific order. But once Jake figured out the pattern, it wasn't so bad. There we go. Loop here, wrap around, pull through. Not so tough once you know the trick. He finished the first boot and moved to the second one. See? Now you try to remember this for next time. Kale was staring at his boot like it was magic. The crying had stopped completely now. The boy's voice was still shaky when he spoke. My father says I must do it myself. He says a prince who cannot conquer his boots cannot conquer an empire. Jake's hands paused for just a second. Prince? This kid was a prince? Well, that explained the fancy clothes. But it didn't explain the weird rule about not helping him. What kind of father let his kid struggle until he cried? Your dad sounds pretty strict, Jake said carefully, going back to untangling the second boot. No judgment in his voice, just stating a fact. But hey, everybody needs help sometimes. That's what makes us strong, you know? Knowing when to ask for it. Nobody gets through life alone. You do not understand, Kale said quietly. There was something old in his voice now, something sad that no kid should sound like. I am Prince Kale of House Vorthen. You could be executed for touching me. Jake's hands froze on the laces. He slowly looked up at the boy. Executed? For helping a kid with his shoes? You're serious, aren't you? Kale nodded, and the tears were coming back now. I am sorry. I did not mean to get you killed. I could not do it. I tried for so long. I tried so hard. But I could not make them work. Before Jake could respond, before he could tell the kid it was okay, before he could say anything, something changed. The air got colder. The lights seemed dimmer. The hair on the back of Jake's neck stood up. A shadow fell across them both. The silence that followed was the longest of Jake's entire life. Every second felt like an hour. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears, like drums beating a warning. Boom, boom, boom. His hands were still on Kale's boot, fingers frozen in place. He could feel the kid trembling beside him. Jake knew he should probably let go. Should probably stand up, back away, apologize. But something stubborn in him refused. If he was going to die for helping a scared kid tie his shoes, then fine. That's how he'd go out. At least he'd be able to look himself in the mirror in whatever afterlife existed. Well, if there was a mirror. And if he still had eyes. Stop thinking about that, he told himself. The massive figure above them didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there like a statue carved from stone and nightmare fuel. Jake could feel those golden eyes burning into the top of his head. Studying him. Judging him. Probably deciding exactly how to execute him. Would it be quick? Would it hurt? Would they space him? Shoot him? Did aliens have firing squads? Finally, after what felt like 1,000 years, the Emperor spoke. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together in an earthquake. Like thunder rolling across mountains. It wasn't loud, but it filled the whole corridor anyway. You know what you have done, human? Jake swallowed hard. His mouth was dry as sand. But he wasn't going to lie. Never been good at lying anyway. His mom always said his face gave everything away. He kept his voice as steady as he could manage. Helped a kid tie his shoes, sir. He heard Kale make a small squeaking sound beside him. The kid was probably horrified. Probably expected Jake to beg for mercy or make excuses. But Jake had never been good at groveling either. What was done was done. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Those golden eyes seemed to glow brighter for a second, like someone had turned up the power. When he spoke again, his voice was harder. Angrier. You have interfered with the trial of readiness. You have touched royalty without permission. You have shown weakness to my heir. Each word came out like a hammer blow. What is your designation? Designation. That was a fancy way of asking who he was. Jake carefully finished tying the second boot, his fingers working on autopilot while his brain tried to keep up with the conversation. There. Both boots done. At least Kale wouldn't have to struggle with them anymore, even if Jake ended up dead in the next 5 minutes. Jake Miller. Maintenance crew, Third shift. Jake slowly stood up. His knees cracked again, loud in the quiet corridor. Standing didn't help much. He still had to crane his neck way back to look at the Emperor's face. The alien was huge. 7 feet tall at least, maybe more. Wearing armor that looked like it was made from black metal and bad dreams. The armor had designs carved into it, patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Scars covered the Emperor's face, cutting through that pale blue skin. Each scar probably had a story. Probably a violent story. But Jake met those golden eyes anyway. If he was going to die, he'd do it standing up and looking his executioner in the face. "Look, I didn't know about any trial," Jake said. His voice was stronger now. The initial fear was fading, replaced by something else. Resignation, maybe. Or just stubbornness. His dad always said Jake was too stubborn for his own good. "I just saw a kid who needed help." "You saw a prince of the Valthorian Empire." "I saw a 7-year-old crying over his shoes." The words came out before Jake could stop them. Probably shouldn't have said that. Probably should have agreed with the scary alien emperor. But it was true. Yeah, the kid was a prince. But he was also just a kid. A scared, frustrated kid who'd been struggling alone until he cried. What was Jake supposed to do? Just walk away? Pretend he didn't hear the crying? That wasn't how Jake was raised. Something flickered in the emperor's eyes. Surprise, maybe? Confusion? It was hard to read alien expressions. The emperor tilted his head slightly, like a dog hearing a strange sound. Then he looked down at his son. Really looked at him. Kale had pressed himself against the wall, trying to make himself smaller. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, glowing tears still wet on his face. The emperor stared at his son for a long moment. Then back at Jake. Jake stood his ground, even though every instinct was screaming at him to run. Not that running would help. Where would he even go? This was a spaceship. Couldn't exactly run home to Earth. Why? The emperor asked. Just that one word. But it carried weight. Like he genuinely wanted to know. Why what? Jake asked back. Why did you help him? The emperor stepped closer. Jake's heart rate kicked up again. What did you hope to gain? What leverage did you seek? What favor will you demand in return? Jake blinked. Those questions didn't even make sense. Leverage? Sir, he's a kid. Kids need help sometimes. That's just what you do. The emperor stared at him like Jake had just spoken in an alien language. Like the concept of helping someone without wanting something back was completely foreign. Which, thinking about it, maybe it was. These were warriors. Conquerors. Everything was probably a transaction to them. Do this, get that. Help someone, they owe you. That's how their world worked. But that's not how Jake's world worked. He needed help, Jake said simply. So I helped him. That's it. No tricks. No deals. No favors. Just, being human, I guess. The emperor continued staring. Then he did something that shocked Jake right down to his bones. The massive alien warrior, ruler of 60 conquered worlds, leader of a galaxy-spanning empire, slowly knelt down. His armor creaked as he lowered himself until he was at eye level with his son. Kale looked absolutely terrified. The boy had probably never seen his father kneel before. Jake certainly never expected to see it. The emperor reached out one huge hand toward Kale. The boy flinched but didn't run. Those giant fingers, each one probably strong enough to crush steel, gently touched the boy's shoulder. Soft. Careful. Like touching something precious that might break. Show me, the emperor said. Not to Kale. To Jake. Sir. Jake's brain had officially stopped working properly. Show me this technique. How the human ties footwear. The emperor looked at Jake, and there was something in those golden eyes now. Something intense. Like he was studying an enemy's battle plan. Like this was the most important thing in the universe. Jake's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. The terrifying alien emperor wanted a shoe-tying lesson? Was this real life? Had he hit his head somewhere and this was all a weird dream? Okay. So you take the lace like this. Jake knelt back down, his brain running on autopilot. He pointed to Kale's boot. You make a loop with one lace. My niece calls it a bunny ear. Then you take the other lace and wrap it around the bunny ear. Then you push it through the hole and pull tight. Creates a knot that holds but you can still untie it later. The emperor watched every movement. His eyes tracked Jake's fingers like a hawk watching a mouse. When Jake finished demonstrating, the emperor did something even stranger. He reached down and carefully untied one of Kale's boots. Then he tried to copy what Jake had done. His massive fingers fumbled with the thin laces. Too big. Too clumsy. The lace slipped through his gauntleted hands. He tried again. The loop fell apart. Tried a third time. Failed again. Jake could see frustration building in the Emperor's face. This was probably the first thing he'd failed at in decades. Maybe centuries. Warriors who conquered galaxies didn't usually struggle with simple tasks. Here, Jake said quietly. He reached out, hesitated, then gently guided the Emperor's hands through the motion. Gentle. It's not about strength. It's about patience. Feel how the lace moves. Let it flow through your fingers. The Emperor's hands were shaking slightly. Actual shaking. But he followed Jake's guidance. Slowly, carefully, he completed the knot. It wasn't pretty. Kind of lopsided. But it held. The Emperor stared at it like he'd just solved the universe's greatest mystery. Then he looked at his son. Kale was watching his father with wonder on his small face. Pure, absolute wonder. Like he'd just seen something impossible. You are not afraid of me, the Emperor observed, looking back at Jake. It wasn't a question. Just a statement of fact. Jake let out a shaky laugh. Oh, I'm terrified, sir. I'm just really good at hiding it. Over the next 3 weeks, Jake noticed something really weird happening. Everywhere he went on the ship, he kept bumping into important people. Not just regular crew members or other janitors. No, these were the big shots. High-ranking officers with enough medals on their chests to open a jewelry store. Government officials in fancy robes that probably cost more than Jake's annual salary. Even a few visiting ambassadors from allied worlds, species Jake had never seen before with tentacles and extra arms and skin colors that didn't exist in nature back on Earth. At first, Jake figured the ship was just getting busier. Maybe they were heading to some important meeting or preparing for a military operation. These things happened on warships. Busy periods where everyone was running around doing important stuff. But then Jake started noticing the pattern. And once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. He'd be down in the training wing, fixing a jammed door that wouldn't slide open properly. Just Jake, his toolbox, and a stubborn piece of alien technology that didn't want to cooperate. He'd be elbow deep in wiring, muttering to himself about why aliens couldn't just use normal hinges, when suddenly a 4-star general would appear. This massive Valthorian officer, important enough that regular soldiers practically threw themselves out of his way, would suddenly need to use that exact corridor. Not the dozen other corridors nearby. No, this specific one where Jake was working. The general would walk past slowly. Very slowly. Watching Jake work. Sometimes he'd stop and pretend to check his datapad, but Jake could feel those eyes on him. Studying his movements. Watching how he organized his tools. Observing how he talked to himself while he worked. Or Jake would be cleaning the officer's mess hall during the quiet period between meals. Wiping down tables, mopping floors, the usual boring stuff. The mess hall had a schedule. Officers ate at specific times in specific places. Jake had learned their patterns. But suddenly, a whole group of tactical advisors would show up at the wrong time. They'd decide to have an impromptu lunch meeting right there, right then, instead of their usual private conference room. They'd sit down with their alien food, spreading out their holographic battle maps and strategic documents. But they weren't really focused on their work. Jake could tell. They were watching him. Every time he'd move to wipe down a nearby table, conversations would pause. Eyes would track his movements. Then they'd go back to their discussion, but louder. Like they wanted him to hear what they were talking about. And the questions. Oh man, the questions. They always tried to make them sound casual. Friendly. Like they were just making conversation with the janitor. But Jake wasn't stupid. He'd been around long enough to know when he was being interrogated, even if it was polite interrogation. So, Jake, tell me about Earth. What are your people like? An officer would ask while Jake was changing out a trash bin. How do humans handle conflict? Do you fight or talk first? A diplomat would wonder aloud while Jake mopped near their table. Why do you organize your tools that way? Is that a human custom? A scientist would question while Jake was restocking cleaning supplies. Every single day brought more of these encounters. Different people, different locations, but always the same underlying current. They were studying him like he was some kind of alien specimen. Which, to be fair, he was. He was the alien on their ship. But this felt different. More intense. More deliberate. Jake wasn't an idiot. He knew exactly what was happening. He was being tested. Evaluated. Observed like a lab rat in one of those psychology experiments. But tested for what? What were they looking for? What did a janitor from Earth have that an empire of galaxy-conquering warriors wanted to understand? He thought about asking someone directly, but decided against it. If they wanted him to know, they'd tell him. Until then, he'd just keep doing his job. Keep being himself. If that's what they wanted to see, fine. He had nothing to hide anyway. 3 weeks into this weird social experiment, Jake was reorganizing a supply closet on the lower deck. This closet was his personal nightmare. Whoever had organized it before him had zero sense of logic. Cleaning chemicals mixed with engine parts. Food supplies next to toxic waste containers. It was chaos. Jake had been slowly fixing it during his spare time, creating a system that actually made sense. He was standing on a small ladder, moving boxes to higher shelves, when he heard something. Footsteps. Small, quick footsteps. Not the heavy boots of soldiers or the measured pace of officers. These were light and fast, like someone running on their toes. Jake turned his head just as Prince Kale peeked around the corner of the doorway. The kid's glowing eyes were wide, his blue face flushed slightly like he'd been running. Kale looked left down the corridor. Then right. Then left again. Like a kid checking for teachers before sneaking out of class. Then he darted inside the supply closet and quickly pressed himself against the wall beside the door. Jake climbed down from his ladder and raised an eyebrow. You okay there, buddy? Sheesh. Kale held a finger to his lips, those glowing eyes pleading. Please, Jake. I am hiding. Hiding from what? My combat instructor. He is looking for me. We are supposed to be practicing blade techniques, but... Kale's face fell. I did not want to go. It is always the same. Strike, block, counter, repeat. 4 hours. I wanted to see you instead. Jake couldn't help but smile. The kid had ditched his royal training to hang out with a janitor. That was either really sweet or really concerning, depending on how you looked at it. Your Highness, I'm pretty sure skipping combat training is a bad idea. Won't your dad be mad? Please, just call me Kale. And father is in a council meeting for the next 2 hours. He will never know. The boy grinned, a mischievous expression that looked completely wrong on someone who was supposed to be learning how to rule an empire. Besides, I have been looking for you. I wanted to ask you something. Ask me what? Can you show me more Earth things? Kale's eyes lit up with excitement. You showed me kindness when you helped with my boots. You showed me patience when you explained the knots. What else do humans do? What else can you teach me? There was something in the kid's voice that tugged at Jake's heart. It wasn't just curiosity. It was loneliness. Deep, aching loneliness. This boy was a prince, surrounded by thousands of people every day, and yet he was lonely. Because everyone around him treated him like a prince. A future ruler. A political symbol. Nobody treated him like a kid. Except Jake. Everything here is about fighting and strategy and honor, Kale continued, his voice getting quieter. Every lesson is about conquest. Every game is about war. Every story is about battles won and enemies destroyed. You are the only person who has ever just talked to me. Like I am a person. Not a prince. Jake set down the box he was holding and walked over to Kale. He knelt down so they were at eye level. You are a person, Kale. You're also a prince, sure. But you're a person first. Kale's eyes got shiny, like he might cry. Will you teach me something? Anything from Earth? Please? Jake thought about it. He thought about his nephew Tommy and his niece Amy back home. All the simple things he'd taught them over the years. Games, songs, jokes, life lessons. Nothing fancy. Just human stuff. Alright, come here. I'll teach you something we call tic-tac-toe. It's a simple game. Won't make you a better warrior or teach you strategy. It's just fun. Fun? Kale repeated the word like it was foreign. What is fun? And that, Jake realized, was the saddest thing he'd heard in a long time. 6 months had passed since that day in the corridor when Jake tied a crying prince's boots. 6 months that felt like 6 years. 6 months that changed everything. Jake stood in the middle of what used to be Storage Bay 7, a massive room that once held military supplies and equipment crates. Now it looked completely different. The cold metal walls had been covered with softer materials. Comfortable seating areas dotted the space. Warm lighting replaced the harsh overhead fluorescence. Jake had named it the Community Hub, though some of the Valthorians still struggled with the concept. Around him, Valthorian soldiers sat in small circles on the floor. Not standing at attention. Not arranged by rank. Just sitting together like normal people, talking. Actually talking about real things. One group was discussing their families back on their home planets. Another was sharing stories about their childhood. A third was laughing, genuine laughter, about some mistake someone made during training. Over by the west wall, a group of officers was running team-building exercises. But these weren't the brutal competition drills Jake had seen when he first arrived. No one was trying to dominate anyone else. Instead, they were working on trust exercises. One officer stood blindfolded while another guided them through an obstacle course using only words. They were learning to trust each other, to rely on each other, to be vulnerable with each other. In the corner near the equipment lockers, 5 engineers huddled around a holographic display showing some kind of engine schematic. They were debating solutions to a technical problem, but there was no hostility. No one was trying to prove they were smarter than everyone else. They were collaborating. Building on each other's ideas. Actually listening instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. It had been slow progress. Painfully slow. Like watching ice melt in winter. Centuries of warrior culture, of hierarchy and dominance and strength above all else, didn't just disappear because a janitor said please and thank you. The Valthorians had spent generations building their society on very specific principles. Power came from strength. Respect came from victory. Weakness was death. Changing that? Might as well try to move a mountain with a spoon. But it was changing. Slowly. One person at a time. One conversation at a time. One moment of genuine human connection at a time. Jake walked through the hub, weaving between the different groups. His cleaning cart was long gone, replaced by a datapad and a title he still couldn't quite believe. Ambassador Jake Miller, cultural liaison between Earth and the Valthorian Empire. It sounded ridiculous. He was a janitor. Or he used to be. Now he was apparently teaching an entire empire how to be human. How did his life get this weird? A young Valthorian soldier spotted Jake and waved enthusiastically. The soldier's name was Kelmar, a kid barely older than 18 in Earth years. Pale blue skin like all Valthorians, golden eyes full of excitement. He'd been one of Jake's first real students, one of the first to genuinely embrace these strange human concepts. Ambassador Jake. Kelmar called out, practically bouncing on his feet. Ambassador Jake, you must hear this. Jake smiled and walked over. Hey Kelmar. What's got you so excited? I practiced what you taught me. Remember? About vulnerability and communication. Kelmar was talking fast, words tumbling over each other. Yesterday we had combat simulations. My squad, we were supposed to clear a hostile ship. But before we started, I did something different. Yeah? What did you do? I gathered my squad in a circle, just like this, Kelmar gestured to the groups around them. And I asked them to share their fears. About the simulation, about combat, about anything. At first they thought I was joking. Soldiers do not discuss fear. Fear is weakness. But I insisted. I told them you said fear is just information. Our body telling us to be careful. Jake nodded. He remembered that conversation. Kelmar had come to him terrified before his first real combat drill, afraid the other soldiers would think he was a coward. Jake had explained that fear wasn't the enemy. Pretending you weren't afraid, that was the real danger. So we went around the circle, Kelmar continued, his eyes shining. Everyone shared one fear. Some worried about letting the team down. Others worried about making mistakes. One soldier admitted he was afraid of tight spaces, which is a problem when boarding ships. We knew this about him now. We could help. That's great, Kelmar. That's exactly what I was talking about. But wait, that is not the best part. Kelmar was grinning now, showing teeth. We ran the simulation. And Jake, we scored 15% higher in coordination than our previous best score. 15%. The commander asked what we did differently. I told him we talked to each other like people first, soldiers second. Jake felt warmth spread through his chest. This was what it was all about. Not grand speeches or official policies. Just people learning to be honest with each other. Learning that vulnerability wasn't weakness. That caring about your teammates made you fight better, not worse. I'm proud of you, Kelmar. That took real courage. You taught me that courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite the fear. Kelmar placed his hand over his heart in a Valthorian gesture of respect. Thank you, Ambassador. You have shown us a new kind of strength. Jake clapped the young soldier on his shoulder. You did the work, buddy. I just pointed you in the right direction. Now go practice some more. Show the others it's okay to be real with each other. Kelmar nodded eagerly and jogged back to his squad, already explaining what happened to his teammates. Jake watched him go, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Real purpose. He moved on to check another group. A mixed crew of tactical officers and maintenance staff, all working together on some kind of logistics problem. 6 months ago, officers wouldn't even acknowledge maintenance crew existed. Different ranks didn't mix. The hierarchy was absolute. Officers gave orders. Lower ranks obeyed. That was the system. But here they were, a lieutenant and a mechanic arguing good-naturedly about the best route for supply ships. Equals. Colleagues. People. Jake's biggest victory, though, the one he was most proud of, was the family integration program. That one had been hard to sell. Really hard. In traditional Valthorian culture, children of warriors were raised in what they called combat creches. Basically military boarding schools from age 5 onward. Kids saw their parents maybe once a month for formal testing and evaluation. No hugs. No bedtime stories. No lazy Sunday mornings eating breakfast together. Just tests and training and preparation for war. It was efficient. It created excellent soldiers. It also created emotionally stunted adults who didn't know how to connect with anyone, including their own children. Jake had convinced Emperor Vorthan to try something radical. Let parents spend time with their kids. Not training time. Not testing time. Just time. Playing. Talking. Being together for no reason except they wanted to be. The pushback had been intense. Generals argued it would make soldiers soft. Politicians worried it would weaken the empire. Everyone predicted disaster. But Vorthan had backed Jake. And slowly, families started spending time together. Jake walked past the recreation area and paused to watch. Commander Talvex, a massive Valthorian warrior who'd personally conquered 6 planets during his career, was playing catch with his daughter. The little girl, maybe 5 years old, was terrible at catching. The ball bounced off her hands more often than she caught it. She'd run after it giggling while her father laughed. Actually laughed. Deep, genuine belly laughs. Talvex saw Jake watching and waved. Ambassador. Look at this. My daughter, she enjoys throwing objects. I did not know this about her. The little girl ran over, dragging the ball. Papa, show Jake how far you can throw. Not now, little one. I might break something. Talvex scooped up his daughter and set her on his shoulders. She squealed with delight. The commander looked at Jake with something like wonder on his scarred face. I did not know she had a laugh. I had never heard it before. 5 years old and I did not know my own daughter's laugh. His voice cracked slightly on those last words. Now you know, Jake said gently. And you'll never forget it. Thank you, Ambassador, for showing us what we were missing. The KRYLL Hive fleet appeared out of jump space without warning. 1 second the view screen showed empty space and distant stars. The next second it was filled with ships. So many ships. They just kept coming, pouring out of the jump space portal like water from a broken dam. Billions of them. Not metal ships like humans or Valthorians built. These were organic. Living ships. They pulsed with bioluminescent light, glowing green and purple in colors that didn't have names. Each ship was part of a single massive consciousness. The Hive. All thinking together. All moving together. All wanting the same thing. War. The fleet stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Jake stood on the command deck of the Stellar Dominion, staring at the view screen, and felt his stomach drop into his boots. He'd seen footage of KRYLL ships before, but seeing them in person was different. Terrifying. Like watching a nightmare come to life. Each ship looked wrong somehow. Twisted. They moved in patterns that made his eyes hurt if he watched too long. All around him, Valthorian officers stood at their battle stations. Weapons were charged. Shields were raised. Every soldier on every Valthorian ship was ready. Waiting for the command to fire. Waiting for the war to start. The tension was so thick Jake could practically taste it. Like metal and electricity and fear all mixed together. But Emperor Vorthan didn't give the order to attack. He stood at the center of the command deck, tall and imposing in his full ceremonial armor. The armor was different today. Not the battle-scarred plates he usually wore. This was ancient armor, passed down through generations of emperors. Black metal inlaid with silver that caught the light. He looked like something out of a legend. A warrior king from old Earth stories. Vorthen turned to look at Jake. Those golden eyes were calm. Determined. He gave a small nod. This was it. Everything they'd planned for. Everything they'd worked toward. 6 months of changing hearts and minds all came down to this single moment. Jake nodded back, even though his heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. The Emperor activated the communication system. His voice would now transmit across all channels. Every Valthorian ship would hear him. Every KRYLL ship would hear him. This message was going to everyone. Vorthen took a breath. When he spoke, his voice was powerful but not aggressive. Strong but not threatening. It filled the command deck and echoed across space itself. KRYLL Hive. This is Emperor Vorthen of the Valthorian Empire. For 300 years, we have been at war. Millions have died on both sides. We have both lost more than we have gained. He paused. Jake could see Valthorian officers exchanging confused glances. This wasn't how emperors usually talked to enemies. Where were the threats? The demands for surrender? The declarations of dominance? Vorthen continued, his voice steady. I am here to tell you that this ends today. Not with battle, but with a choice. The response came immediately. The KRYLL didn't have individual voices. When they spoke, it was thousands of voices layered together, all saying the exact same words at the exact same time. It sounded like a choir from hell. Cold. Mechanical. Without emotion. Valthorians only understand strength. This is deception. You seek advantage through words because you fear our numbers. Some of the Valthorian officers bristled at that. Jake saw hands clench into fists. Jaws tighten. Nobody accused Valthorians of cowardice. Not without consequences. But Vorthen raised one hand slightly. A command for patience. For control. It is not deception, the Emperor replied. It is evolution. 6 months ago, a human taught me something that changed my empire forever. He taught me that strength without compassion is hollow. That true power comes not from domination, but from unity. From connection. From choosing to help instead of harm. Weakness, the Hive responded. You have been infected by the human's defective empathy programming. This makes you vulnerable. We will exploit this vulnerability. Jake felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't going well. The KRYLL saw empathy as a disease. As something wrong. How do you reason with a consciousness that thinks caring about others is a defect? But Vorthen had anticipated this. He looked at Jake again, and Jake gave him a thumbs up. A simple human gesture they'd practiced. It meant go ahead, you've got this. No, Vorthen said firmly. We have not been weakened. We have been enhanced. Watch. He switched the transmission feed. Now the KRYLL could see inside Valthorian ships. The command deck cameras showed soldiers standing together, not just at attention, but with hands on each other's shoulders. Supporting each other. The feed switched to a medical bay where officers were kneeling beside wounded comrades, offering comfort and encouragement. Then to a recreation area where families embraced before battle. Parents holding children. Partners holding each other. This is what we have become, Vorthen said. We fight now not for conquest, but for each other. Our bonds make us stronger, not weaker. We coordinate better because we trust each other. We think more creatively because we share ideas instead of hoarding them. We protect each other with a ferocity you cannot calculate because it comes from here. Vorthen placed a fist over his heart. A human gesture. Jake had taught him that. It comes from emotion, the Emperor continued. From love. From loyalty that is chosen, not programmed. From connections built through trust and vulnerability and yes, compassion. These things do not make us weak. They make us unstoppable. There was silence. The KRYLL fleet held position. Neither advancing nor retreating. Jake could imagine the Hive consciousness processing this information. Analyzing it. Trying to understand something completely foreign to their nature. Finally, the Hive spoke again. This is illogical. Emotion is inefficient. Compassion wastes resources. Yet our analysis shows your empire's combat effectiveness has increased by 18.7% since implementing these behavioral modifications. We do not understand this paradox. Jake felt a flicker of hope. They were listening. Actually listening. Not just dismissing it as weakness. They were confused, which was better than hostile. Vorthen gestured to Jake. Time for the human to speak. Jake's mouth went dry. He was about to address a species of billions. A collective consciousness that had fought the Valthorians for 3 centuries. A hive mind that saw empathy as a disease. No pressure or anything. Jake stepped forward and activated his own communicator. His voice would be so much smaller than Vorthan's. Less impressive. Less authoritative. But maybe that was okay. Maybe they needed to hear from someone ordinary. "Farewell, Hive," Jake said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "I'm Jake Miller. I'm nobody important. Just a janitor from Earth who helped a kid tie his shoes once. That one small act changed an entire empire. That's what humans do. We help each other. We build bonds. We make each other stronger through connection." "You are the anomaly," the Hive said. "The human who corrupted Valthorian efficiency with emotional contamination." "I didn't corrupt anything," Jake replied. "I just reminded them they were people first and warriors second. Look, you're a collective consciousness, right? You're already united. You already work together perfectly. But it's not real unity. It's programming. You don't choose to help each other. You're forced to because you're all one mind." "Choice is inefficient," the Hive responded. "Maybe," Jake said. "But choice is also what makes bonds real. Real strength comes when individuals choose to work together even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Even when they're scared. That's what we're offering. Not surrender. Not weakness. Partnership. All 3 of our peoples working together. Learning from each other. Becoming something none of us could be alone." The view screen changed again. Now it showed footage of Valthorian and human engineers working side by side in the community hub. Solving problems together. Laughing together. Medical teams from both species sharing techniques. Parents teaching children through patience instead of punishment. Soldiers training together, protecting each other, caring about each other's survival. "This is the human way," Vorthan said. "And we are offering it to you. Stand down. Let us meet as potential allies rather than eternal enemies. Let us find a path forward that doesn't require billions more deaths. Let us choose peace." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Could hear other people breathing on the command deck. Everyone was frozen. Waiting.